live stream right now.
Alrighty.
Hey, this is looking correct. Suddenly I press go. Alright all, this is Pastor Matthew. We have changed locations for our live stream, and I'm currently starting early simply so that I can see if it really works. So don't mind the conversations in the background and the noises and the setup. We're just making sure we're good to go so that when you turn on your computer or your phone, you have a Sunday school lesson streaming through. So with that said, Jasmine, you can come over here and say hi if you want to. You gotta be over here. I think Jasmine wants to say hi.
Hi.
Alright, let's see what we look like online now. That's the big question. Go into my subscriptions. Adults live streaming now. Oh, wow, look at that. I can totally see myself and my dad, and I can hear us. Hey, this is good news. So you guys just kind of kick back, relax. We'll start Sunday school in just a few minutes, as you'll be hearing us talking in the background and setting up shop. So thank you all for joining us. Love you all, and let me know. Give me feedback. You can shoot me an email, pastor@gbcsbc.org. Email me or put it in the comments here. Let me know if this worked. If you can hear it well, if you can see it well. I'm done talking for now. Have fun, y'all. God bless. See you soon.
What comment is it? I don't know. It just says one.
That's me.
Oh.
I'm watching it on my phone.
Did it sound okay to you?
Yeah, it sounds good. I'm listening to it now.
Okay.
I want to see the setup.
Yeah.
See?
It's right here.
Woohoo!
So it looks like here.
Oh, very nice.
Yeah. So we are streaming now. I've told people we're going on early just to make sure
It works.
it works.
Is there a time limit?
No, it just keeps going and going and
So
going.
like 1 hour and we're not unplugged or anything like that?
No, it'll just keep, as far as I know, I've never heard of any
Because I thought
time
that
limit.
was a problem before, that's why I was asking.
No, I don't think that's an
You
issue.
might have to double check with Lee on that.
Yeah, I can definitely do that too.
Thank you.
Hey, Lonnie, good to see you. We are live streaming, so know that any you can come on in. Just know that any conversations you share may be recorded for posterity's sake.
Oh no.
So
Well, I'm not recording anything.
no, but YouTube does.
I
So
like his Ukraine shirt.
what's that?
I like his Ukraine shirt.
Yeah. Hey.
Oh yeah, sunflowers.
Yeah.
Is that a
You
Ukraine
guys
color?
have
Or
fun?
something? I
Wish
didn't
me
know
well.
that.
Where are you
Well.
going?
I had no idea
No,
about
no.
that. I just wore it
Oh,
because
that's
it's
right. You're leading
springtime.
that group.
Yes.
Have fun with them this morning. Good luck.
Yeah.
Keep them in order. You know.
Yeah,
I've got
okay.
a large stick in my office if you need
Okay.
it.
All right. Bryce is in there, and I said, "You're stuck with me," and he goes, "Oh, it's happened before."
He may not be in there when you get back there now.
Yeah. Maybe not.
Okay, I'll see how. Come on. Christina?
Nope, not budging.
Well, we're going to start here in about 5 minutes.
Turn. Back. 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 So far.
It's just those 5 days after
Why?
the weekend that are the toughest. After work.
I just realized I don't have enough of these handouts, so I need to make more next time.
What?
I can make a copy or two for you. I'm going
Well-
upstairs now.
I suppose it probably won't turn out very well, but that's okay. You make a copy of the copy then.
Was it the one you emailed us?
Yes.
I can just print it from the computer then.
Well, whatever works.
Yeah. I'll make sure to do a replication of this. I will be back shortly. So you are live.
I'm live, okay.
So whenever you're ready, you can just look up at the camera, say hello, and that'll be the
Yes.
formal start. So
So.
you can see a few second delay that's going to be up there.
I see that.
Usually the video up there is delayed by some random interval, and so
I got some clothespins up here to hold that cord if needed.
okay,
That,
great.
in case you're wondering. But it looks like it's working just like we thought.
I think it's smooth. I forgot that I needed to install OBS, so I did install a new program on my computer. It's Open Broadcasting Systems OBS, this little black circle. And you basically put a streaming key in there, and you can kind of add transitions or whatever you
I'm
want
not
to.
worried about it. You can...
Right now, I'm keeping it simple. But all that said, you've got a new program installed by me.
All right.
And it shouldn't do anything but let us basically live stream with a little bit more ease.
And you'll have more people this afternoon when I do my class.
Yes, that is awesome. All right, I think.
I usually just put it up on their TV, and
Oh, really? Huh.
it's English as a second language.
Have you kept connected?
Well, then I'm going to say, hi, CC group.
That's right. So have you kept connected with Nadia since you?
Glad you could make it with us.
I have her phone number, and I did she hasn't called me back.
Tell her I say hello if you get to call her again later this week.
I will.
I'll do that. I'm gonna close the door just to limit the background noise.
Sure. You might want to have the person greeting to make sure they know to divert people down here, or maybe you put a little sign up.
Yes.
About one downstairs.
Yep, I will go make sure of that now.
Ding ding. The bulletins are not out. All right. Well, this will be a different experience. Hi, Lonnie. Come on in.
Thank you.
Good to see you.
Good to be here today.
Yep, back in the class again. All right. I feel like this old friend I haven't been around for a while. Here we go.
I hadn't seen this room before.
Oh, you haven't been here before?
No,
Okay.
I've always seen you.
Yeah. Yeah, this is my classroom that I've used for many years actually now. And
An old friend.
It's an old friend, yeah. I had to add a shelf up there so that I could put the laptop and have a spot to anchor my camera. Don't worry, it won't fall down. When I build things, I over-engineer it by times 3.
I ain't scared.
It won't come down unless some kid pulls it down. That'd be the only way. Anyway, but
Well, Tina regrets she can't be in here with you today. She's overdoing the young adults.
that's what I understand. She's substituting in the other class or helping out in the other class.
It was kind of cute watching her prepare for it. She was all excited. I haven't done this in a long time.
Yeah. Well, let me see. One thing I do know I don't have is the same amount of room because I used to spread out on 3 different things. But that's okay.
Someone needs to make you a new desk.
Well,
One that has a one that goes back on the side.
yeah. This was actually an item I picked up at an auction for like $20.
Yeah.
It's really nice, well-built wooden one. And
I know it matches my dining room set.
it used to have casters. I took the casters off because I didn't want it rolling all over the place. I think there's tape underneath here somewhere. I put them somewhere in here. Maybe I didn't.
They are not there.
Well, what did I do with it? Oh. I must have left them at home then. Never mind. I could have sworn I put them underneath here. Anyway, it works for me. I think I'm centered. I can't tell. Looks like I'm off a little bit on the screen.
Yes, you are. You need to come.
Well, hold on here. Let me take a look real quick and see where it's showing it. Yeah, let's position us a little bit. Let's see. I need more that way.
You want to come my way?
Okay, we'll see how that looks, if it looks any better here. Da, 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 da. And now I'm getting up to check. Let's see if I did go too far. Oh, there's my hand. That's too far. That's too far. No, it's fine. I'll be in the picture now. But the problem here is my key verse part of the thing won't be in the thing. Oh well. You know what? Let's see. I need to go back a tiny bit and just leave it there. And maybe move my chair. That would be a better thing. I will move my chair and try
Why
that.
don't you turn your bookcase that way, and then you'll be able to spread out there.
I'm not worried about it right now, but maybe it's a future thing, yeah. Let's see. I'm up there adjusting now. Let me see. I go sit down, see where I'm looking at here. Yeah, that should work. I still don't see that poster, so that's okay. That's not a big deal. It's not a worry. I think for some reason I must have shifted and not realized I shifted like that way. I probably did. I needed more this way.
So do we need to put X's down for you?
So maybe I'll have, yeah, that's exactly what you see.
Tape
So-
on the floor.
I think this will be fun. Anyway, well, we need to start going here, I guess. So when people come in, they'll come in. So we'll just go ahead and begin. So for our listening and viewing audience, hi, my name is Norm Ellis, and this is Grace Baptist Church Adult 1 Bible Study. We're trying something new. We're back into my old classroom again. We're out of the auditorium. That way I'm not conflicting with auditorium set up and different things like that, which seems to always be a problem. But it's nice because now we're back into old digs. We're back to where I was prior to the COVID thing. And I think this should work out great. We'll give it a shot and see how the digital will now work with us in the classroom. And I think it will. The camera we have is a pretty good camera. It's got a good microphone, so it should hopefully pick it up. But I encourage you guys to speak up a little bit so they can hear it. I'm not going to, I used to repeat questions because if we didn't have a microphone on somebody, the people out there didn't know. So I think it'll work good if we just project a little bit more. I don't think we got a problem there. Most of us are.
Use our outside voices?
Not outside, but yeah. I work at a primary school, and I'm a recess person. And so I use my outdoor voice. It's a loud outdoor voice. You don't want to hear my loud outdoor voice.
You're using the sergeant voice?
Well, that's my command voice. I can use that too. That sometimes rises to the command level too. Anyway, we're going to be talking today about the promised return of Christ and how it gives us as Christian believers hope, especially hope when grieving. And this is a concern that Paul had for the Thessalonian church. And it's titled Promised, and it's in session number 6, which starts on page 55 if you're following along in your lesson book if you have one. And we're going to be looking at these 3 areas, or these 3 points. First one is hope, and we're in 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, starting with verse 13 and 14. So that one is hope. And then the second one is return, and that is verses 15 and 16. And then the last one is reunion, number 3, and that's 17 through 18. So let's go ahead and open with a word of prayer, and then we'll start. Heavenly Father, thank you for the opportunity we have to read your word, Lord, to study these words that Paul wrote to this church, this young church that he had so many good things to say about, Lord. And Lord, I just pray that we would understand these things in our world today and how they apply to us, because they do. And Lord, I look forward to this study, and be with those who aren't here yet. Help just guide them and have a safe journey to church, Lord. And for those online, thank you for them viewing also. And just pray for those that are sick today and those that are grieving as well, Lord. In your Son's precious name, amen. So, to get us started here, hi, come on in.
Good morning.
Good to see you guys. Hi, Phil. Hi, Rhoda.
Good morning.
Good morning. I have a handout for you guys to share together. Hopefully I'll have some more because I'm running low here. Oh, I forgot to hand, you reminded me. I have verses. We are on the air, just so you know. We have a little camera up there and everything. Hopefully if we speak up, people can hear us online as well. We have some verses here. Who would like a verse? Anybody?
I'll take one.
Oh, all right, I got a volunteer. Would
Give
you
me a
like,
thin one.
would you like a verse?
Thin one.
Which one?
A thin one.
A thin one. Oh, well, let's see. That's a thin one.
The big one right here.
The big one. Well, I don't have really big one. Okay, get that one there. Do you want to do one?
Uh-oh.
No? I'll hold on to that. Maybe somebody else comes in. I don't want to put you in a spot. Number 4 is mine. We'll see what happens there. Anyway, back to what I was going to say. And our introduction is kind of an interesting introduction. It's talking about, of all things, punctuation. Punctuation? What do you mean by punctuation? But we're going to talk about punctuation symbols or marks as used in the English language, just to get us thinking here a little bit. So, what are some various punctuation symbols that you know about in the English language?
The period.
Period. I like that one.
Exclamation.
Exclamation mark. Yeah. What's another good?
Commas.
Commas. Yes. Semicolon. Right. Anybody else?
Question mark.
What's
You
that?
said question mark.
Question mark. Yep. Yep. Yep.
Exclamatory, is that right?
Yeah. Exclamation mark. Yeah. Yeah. There's all. I didn't know this. You learned something the other day. There's 14 punctuation marks that are used in the English language. 14. Wow. I'm so 14. What other 4? Well, anyway, these are categorized in 5 different groups. The first one is sentence endings, and it's the period, the question mark, the exclamation mark, right? The second one is like a continuation mark, if you will, a comma, or comma, yeah, colon, and semicolon. And the third one is the dash and the hyphen.
Oh, yeah.
What's the difference in there? Not much. The next one is brackets, braces, and parentheses. Yes, there's 3 different kinds. And the fifth one is apostrophe, quotation marks, and the ellipse. What is the ellipse?
Isn't that the dot, dot, dot?
You got it! I was gonna stump you guys on that one because I didn't know that. Yeah, exactly right. The dot, 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 which means continued.
3 dots.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Dot, dot, dot.
I use that all the time.
Yeah, there's a lot of those that we use and don't even think about it. But there's actually 14 of those things. And there's actually, the dash has, there's like 2 kinds of dashes. There's a short dash and a long dash. I can't remember what the differences were. But that's okay. The short dash also looks exactly like the hyphen, so I don't know what you want to call that. Anyway, these marks, are they important when you're building a sentence?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Oh my goodness, are they important? Yeah. And they can mean all. Have you ever seen these little memes where it has a sentence and it depends on how you accentuate or how you put a comma, or it's really kind of cute to see how that changes the structure of that. And but the main ones they want us to look at here is the period and the comma. Now, why would that be, do you think? Well, there's a reason. There's a reason for their thing here. The period and the comma they occur within a sentence, obviously, but there's particular reasons for them. What would be the reason for the period?
It ends the.
It's the end. That's we're done. It's the end, right? What about the comma?
It allows you to pause, but continue the
Yes,
thought.
there's more to come, right? And what we're talking about today is the promised return of Christ and how it gives us hope, especially when grieving, and because that's what Paul was concerned about here. And so, the time of Christ does not end with a comma. It does not end with a period. Okay, our Christian walk does not end with a period. It has a comma because there's more to come. See, isn't that cute how they did that? So that gives us an idea, the significance between those 2 different kinds, right? Another question, how would you describe the spirit of the last funeral you attended?
Joyful.
Joyful, okay. Anybody else?
Honorable.
Honorable, okay. Sometimes it's somber.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it's regretful. Sometimes it's so sad.
So sad.
So sad. And I remember a funeral, I think I might have mentioned this before because it made such an impression on me. When I was a child, my cousin died. It was a terrible thing. He was a young boy, a little bit younger than me, and he stepped out in front of a car after getting off a bus. And it was horrible. And he was adopted. He was the adopted son of my aunt and uncle, and they were older, and it was like their pride and joy was this boy. And it was a real sad thing to see. But I remember the funeral was very, very sad, very, very sad. But I've been to other funerals where, for a Christian man or woman who has died, passed on, and you know where they're at. And that was that joyful kind of thing. So we can have those kind of experiences at a funeral. But the question is did most treat the death in that funeral that you saw as a period or as a comma? Good point, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I went to one funeral also. It was for a guy that was a co-worker, and he was not in the Masons. It was some other group like that. But it was really a sad one. It was a sad thing, and that was kind of the period. Like it's over now, you know. Another co-worker had died. He was a PJ person, a rescue parachute jumper type person, and it was a real sad one too as well. But I've been to so many others, so many more that had like the comma kind of funeral where you know the best is coming for them. I can't wait to see what they're seeing right now, that kind of thing. So that's what kind of thing we're going to look at a little bit in our lesson today, our study today. Because in today's study we're going to see that Paul's letter here, 1 Thessalonians, is providing hope for grieving believers. By focusing on the promised return of Christ. Now, in our little outline, and I have an outline behind me, but it's also in our handouts. So if you got a copy of our handouts, and I know I emailed them out to some people, so some people online might also see them. it would be handout number 2, and it says outline. And we're actually on number 6. So if you want to know where we are in our study of 1 Thessalonians, and where he talks about Christ's second coming, his second coming. And that's just to give you a little idea of where we are in that part of that. But as Paul begins to conclude this letter. He's only got one more chapter to go here, chapter 5, right? He begins to conclude this letter to the church of Thessalonica. He's focusing on now the pending return of Christ. Return of Christ. Why did he write this particular part of the letter? And there was a concern that he had been relayed to by Timothy, because he'd sent Timothy because he couldn't come. He wanted to come. And he sent Timothy there. And Timothy had reported back on all these different things. And one of the things, obviously, that he must have talked about was the fact that they were having problems processing grief for those brothers and sisters that had died. And there's a reason for that. There had been some false teachers, apparently, who were teaching some erroneous heresies, like false teachers do. And apparently one of these false doctrines they were teaching had to do with the second coming. Or it could be the Thessalonians just maybe didn't understand teaching, and that could be as well. But they're pretty sure that there's a lot of false teachings, and this is one of them. And one of the teachings was that about the timing of the second coming and what was going to happen. And what they had been taught apparently was that if you're alive when Christ comes, you'll go to be with him, with the Lord, and that's great. But what about if you're dead? Well, sorry, it's too late now. You're not going to be able to be in heaven. Apparently, that was one of the teachings they were, and that's, I said, it's foreign to us because it's heresy, error, whatever word you want to put onto it. It was causing, of course, what for the Thessalonians? What was it causing for them when they thought about their people that had passed on?
Oh, immense grief.
Grief, yeah. Think about that. You're not going to see that mother or that father, a close friend or co-worker, because they died already before Christ came. Because remember, they believed sincerely that any time now Christ would come, as we do. We know that it's been a couple thousand years. Just like when they were in Egypt, or they were in Babylon, they knew they were going to be delivered. It was just a matter of when. And of course, you want it now. Everybody does, right? When do you want your food when you go to a fast food place? I want it now. We're a fast food generation, so it's hard for us to understand that kind of stuff. But they had the same feelings, and then suddenly somebody would die, and they said, "Oh no, we're not going to see them now." So you understand that this kind of teaching would be a very, very difficult thing for them to understand. Is there other teachings like that you've heard? Maybe you want to share any of them? Give me a chance to wet my whistle here. No?
There's a belief in a church in the South that if you die, there's only supposed to be, I forgot how many, 700 and some odd people who get to go to heaven.
Yeah.
And the rest of you are just stuck.
Yeah, that's one of the Jehovah's Witnesses' beliefs too. There's 144,000, and that's it. Nobody else can make it, And so they reached that amount, and now what do you do with that group? Well, shoot, I'm 144 plus 1. Oh, I can't make it. So they made up and changed their doctrine. They called them the Jonadabs. I know what you're talking about, yeah. And the Jonadabs, they can make it too. They're not quite as good as the first 144,000. But yeah, there's things like that, right? And also, there's also some teachings that you missed Christ's second coming. It happened already. You've heard that before? Yeah. Apparently, the Jehovah's Witnesses again were real big on these kind of prophecies, and they had said that they've set dates. The date came and he didn't come, so they sent a new date. And the date came and he didn't come, so they sent a new date. So finally, they knew this is looking ridiculous. So when the next date expired, they said, "Oh, he came invisibly." You didn't know it, but he came, and so he came. And so that was another false teaching. But there's all kinds out there, and I don't want to focus just on that kind of aspect of it.
If you don't close your eyes during prayer, you're not saved.
Oh, yeah, you got to close your eyes, right? Yeah, we put all kinds of different things on things sometimes, don't we? We got to be careful of that. Careful not to do that because the Bible doesn't say that.
That's one of those false teachers.
Yes.
Is that kind of like handling the snakes, and if you get bit, you don't go to the hospital?
Yeah, the snake handlers. Yeah. That comes from a part of Mark. It's at the very end that they believe was maybe an appendix that somebody said, well, this will happen too, and then it got introduced as being part of the text after a while. But this nowhere else does it say that. So they believe that it was not really part of that original text. Anyway, we could follow that rabbit a while, but we're not going to. But Paul was concerned because this was causing what for them? Grief, sadness, confusion. Because I thought, Christ was going to save everybody. Well, now we've been told that that's not going to happen for some people. They're going to stay in the grave because they died already. So that would be understandably a confusing and sad thing, demoralizing too, wouldn't it?
He said he'd be with us forever.
He said he'd be with us forever, yeah. So Paul heard about this, and he was very concerned for this church in that regard. Now, not because that church was doing anything in error, but because they'd been influenced, apparently, by these groups a little bit, and they were grieving, not understanding some of these things. So he's likely combating this false teaching about those who had died and had not been resurrected. They would have to wait until after those living were resurrected, and there was some ambiguity, some uncertainty, so they didn't know. Paul knew that without the truth of the future resurrection, and all believers, followers of Jesus, had no hope beyond this world. Paul did not tolerate false teaching or allow it to go unchecked. He was faithful to stand on the truth of God's word, and in so doing, he set an example for all those who come after him. That means us, right? That standard still applies. When we see false teaching influencing people wrongly, we need to stand up and say, wait a minute, let's look at the scripture and see if that really says, and maybe gently help them to understand that's not really what it's saying. Because we have to be gentle, because there's times when people get stuck on things, don't we? And we don't want to turn people away from knowing the truth. We want to gently guide them sometimes to that. Anyway, so that's our introduction. But there is something I wanted to also start as we begin our first point here. And the first point is hope. And we're going to be looking at 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, verses 13 and 14. And this hope that he's going to be talking about is tied up into a word, a Greek word. And I know, what? Greek? What do you mean Greek, Norm? But this Greek word is, let's see if I can pronounce it right, parousia. Now, there's two ways to pronounce it. Parousia is the one I'm sticking with, because this is an easier way. Parousia. And it's spelled P-A-R-O-U-S-I-A. And you might say, well, why do we need to know Greek? We don't really have to know Greek, but we need to know why they used words and what those words meant. In your handout, you'll see in the middle of the first page, there is a description of it, and I have a little more information on it too. But it talks about being a fairly common Greek word, and it has the meaning of the personal presence. More especially, it can mean arrival or presence after absence. Also, it can mean coming, and we see that in 1 Thessalonians 4:15, which is one of our verses, by the way. It can also mean incarnation, by the way. In the Hellenistic Greek culture or society, it was often used for the arrival of a ruler at a certain place. So when that king or prince came to your town, you'd be talking about the parousia of King Albert, or whatever his name would be. That's how they'd use that, because it's anticipated. They know that person's coming, and now he's here. It's an exciting thing, right? But in the New Testament, it is applied almost exclusively to the coming of Christ, the future visible return from heaven of Jesus, to raise the dead, to hold the last judgment, and to set up formally and gloriously the kingdom of God. That word parousia means all of that. It's kind of an all-encompassing term. It's not just the fact of presence, but it's talking about that whole aspect of Christ. It says the end is not to be expected instantly, and there are still signs that need to come to pass, and there's a need of patience, James 5:7, but it is at hand. Now remember, what being at hand means it could come at any time. And we're in the last days right now. We don't know if the last days are going to last another 1,000 years, or another 2 years, or another 2 days, or another minute. Well, I better not wait. But anyway, we don't know, do we? So we need to be ready, though. Need to be ready, and that's what this term parousia means. And additionally, I got a little more on that. Along with those things there, as an example, it's a common Greek word used in other things. Paul rejoiced at the parousia of Stephanas and Fortunus and Achaicus. And that's in one of the verses in Acts, I believe. Later, Paul was comforted by the arrival of Titus. So he's comforted by the parousia of Titus. We see that in 1 Corinthians 16:17 and 2 Corinthians 7:6 for that last one. Another interesting parallel on how it's used for the case of Jesus is the parable of the 10 bridesmaids. Do you remember that parable? It's an interesting parable. And it's in Matthew 25, but you guys can look that up later. But just to talk about it, we had these bridesmaids. We had 5, if I remember right, that were ready and had the oil for the lamp, if I remember right, and 5 that were not ready. And they were waiting for the bridegroom. Now, maybe I'm confusing this with another one, I can't remember. Anyway, they had fallen asleep while waiting for the bridegroom. Then they were awakened by a shout and a command. The command was to meet the bridegroom as he arrived. Interesting. They rose up and they went with him into the wedding feast. Okay, very, very interesting to think about that parable here. Okay, likewise in the Thessalonians, the issue was the state and participation of the believers who had fallen asleep. Now we're going to see this word fallen asleep. If you know your New Testament, you've probably seen that more than one time. It doesn't mean always when you see it falling asleep to go to sleep. They're using it as a euphemism. If you know what that means a word for. So instead of saying the person's dead, they'll say they have fallen asleep. We use the same thing, don't we? What do we say instead of the person's dead?
They passed.
They passed. Yeah. They've gone to their reward. You know, there's other ways we say it. We don't like to say sometimes certain words, so we use euphemisms. It's another word for that sounds a little better. And so that's what this term fallen asleep, as we're going to see later on, means. And so this parable that Jesus told of the 10 bridesmaids is a description of what is going to happen in the future. And Paul is essentially relating this now to the Thessalonians. He doesn't say per se it's from this parable, but I think this teaching definitely has roots maybe in this parable. Anyway, so likewise when Jesus arrives, he'll be accompanied by a shout, right? The voice of the archangel. Is archangel important? Yes, very important, right? We only know of Gabriel and Michael, and they theorize that those are the 2 archangels. Anyway, they were in charge of all their companies of angels. This is then the dead who have fallen asleep, or they were dead, like I said, they will rise first and be caught up with the living saints to meet the Lord and be with him forever. This parousia entails all this idea. The dead in Christ will rise first. This is a new key piece of information introduced by Paul, and we're going to read about that here in a moment. After meeting the Lord in the air, the believers will be with him always, and it means evermore at all times. Okay, no more separation. Jesus will be with us, and we will be with him. It's important to remember that Paul's purpose was to reassure the Thessalonians regarding the participation of dead saints in the events of that day. Dead believers will be resurrected and reunited with those still alive, and together they will all meet Jesus as he descends from heaven. No true believer will be excluded or shortchanged like the false teachers were trying to say. Okay, that's what Paul's trying to reassure them. So anyway, now that I already told the lesson, but we still need to look at it a little bit better. So let's look at the first point here. Hope. So when we read these first verses, 13 and 14, I want you to listen for the words of hope for believers who died, as well as those who remain and are grieving. Okay? So let's look at 1 Thessalonians 4, 13 through 14. And when you read, make sure you read out pretty good voice. Right. Not super loud, but loud enough for our viewers at home to hear us. Okay? Go ahead.
Yes. But we do not want you to be uninformed, brethren, about those who are asleep, so that you will not grieve as do the rest who have no hope. For if we believe that Jesus died and rose again, even so God will bring him those who have fallen asleep in Jesus.
Wow. So what kind of words of hope do we see in these verses here? That Paul is trying to comfort them with. What do you think?
Can you say it again?
What kind of words of hope do you see in comfort in these first two verses that Paul is trying to relate?
Well, if we believe,
Okay.
even so God will bring him those who have fallen asleep.
Okay.
So if you believe and are strong in your faith,
Yeah.
you will see them again.
If you are a
those
believer.
those that you feel that you have lost.
Right. Yeah. Good. Anything else?
In the same way, because it says, for if we believe that Jesus died and rose again,
Mhm.
in the same way.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. I like the very first part too. It says, I do not want you to be uninformed, brothers and sisters. In other words, I care for you so much that I'm writing this letter to you so you'll know the truth about this and you won't be misled by these people. So he cares enough to say, I'm going to tell you these things because I don't want you to have the wrong information. That's good too, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Any other words of hope you see? Of encouragement?
So you won't grieve
Yeah.
those who have no hope.
He's worried for them. He doesn't want them to be grieving. Okay? And it says, as do the rest who have no hope. Now, who's the rest that have no hope?
Those that don't believe.
Those that are unbelievers, right? Yeah. They do. They have no hope. And if you think about it, it's a sad situation, isn't it? Boy, it'd be a sad situation. And so if you had a family member or a friend who was in that situation, you would want them to be believers. And so, this, otherwise, and he's going to be addressing this subject in a moment, this would be a discouraging thing if this wasn't true what Paul is saying, right? So this is encouraging them to be enthused for the Lord more. And again, it talks about, it says, even so God will bring with him those that have fallen asleep in the Lord. So we will be with him. We will be next to him. We'll be along with him. That's the kind of term you're seeing here. Okay? Would that be an encouraging thing too? Sure would, wouldn't it? It would be something I look forward to. And I think that they are too as well. So, in light of all this, what has shaped your view of death and dying? Has anything in particular shaped your view of death?
I think it's an interesting debate because as I've been reading and listening to you,
Yeah.
I'm thinking he's not only talking about those who have died,
Yeah.
but those who were believers but have fallen asleep or gotten lazy in the strength of their faith, and and then there are believers, and so we as believers need to not give up or grieve even those that have gotten lazy and have gone away from Christianity.
Mm-hmm.
Not the ones that don't believe, but the ones that did,
Yeah.
but have fallen asleep. And I know very, very, very many people who fall into that.
There are people that have grown cold.
Yes.
It doesn't mean they're unsaved. If they're truly saved, all it means is they're not fellowshipping like they should be.
Right, and that to me is falling
Yeah.
asleep.
Right. Well, and I understand that. Now, the way he's using it here, it means death.
Okay.
But there are those situations as well that you're talking about where somebody's grown cold and not fellowshipping and not learning more. They're staying at that childlike level, not growing in the Lord. And we talked about that, of course, the last couple of weeks with
Right.
how in the area of holiness and sanctification, which that means growing more and more to be like the Lord. Yeah. But it is important to remember that we need to stay close to the Lord. We need to continue to grow in the Lord. Otherwise, that will happen, right?
Right. I recognize it in myself. And
Yeah.
That's why I'm here.
Yes, exactly right. Anybody else? What has shaped your view of death and dying? I mentioned already mine. That kind of did is when I was a little kid, I went to a funeral, and boy, it was very, very vocal. I mean, there was a lot of grieving going on. In one of the Gospels, it talks about how they had these mourners that were paid to do this. They were just wailing and wailing, And Jesus said, "Don't have to do that. The girl's not dead," or whatever the situation was. He says, "Oh, you don't know what you're talking about." And we got these professional wailers. Well, I went to this one funeral, and my goodness, they were just hollering almost with their grief. It was horrible. That kind of shaped my view of that. I didn't really want to go to funerals after that. I don't know about you, but as a child, that'd be very much of a devastating type of thing. Yeah. Anybody have an experience or something like that maybe shaped your view of things like that?
I think serving overseas and seeing some of the cultures there that
right. Different countries and how they do the grieving process. Yeah.
Yeah, and the way they believe, they don't. They think they're Christians, but they're not, because they brought their pagan beliefs into and made it a part of the church, and so for them, they have to do a bunch of things to help get that person into.
Yeah. They have no hope unless something else is done, something that man has to do, which we know that's not correct. Yeah, definitely. I understand what you're saying. I'm trying to think if there's something else. Oh, well, of course, my father, when he died about 6-7 years ago now, I think it is, and great man of God, and he'd been he had a stroke that he couldn't talk and things like that, and so for a long time, he was that way before he passed on. But yet, to see him helping other people as best he could, he'd go in his wheelchair and he'd go down and visit people in that home. He was in a rest home, a convalescent center, and he'd visit those people, and they would look forward to him coming again to visit him. Some of them couldn't get out of their beds, but he could get around. And he'd do that, and to see that, and then when he passed away, I knew he was with the Lord. It's one of those kind of things where he's so much better off now. I miss him terribly, but I know where he's at. And I think that's, since then, that's probably shaped me the most, seeing that situation. Anyway, but those kind of things, right? So Paul was combating this false teaching that those who had recently passed away, they would somehow miss out on the resurrection, and the believers would not be reunited with their loved ones. And of course, this was not true. And these early missionaries, they were actively fighting against these kind of lies with the truth. So, can an inaccurate teaching about the return of Christ cause despair?
Yes.
Oh, that's one of those self-evident questions. I know. That's a softball, Norm. Give me a hard ball. But yeah, it can it? Sure can. It can cause us to be in despair. And Paul did not want that to be. Now, in our handouts, we have handout number 3, I think it is. And I just wanted you to be aware of it. We're not going to have time to go through it all, these things, but there's some really good information here about when believers die. This is handout number 3, it says at the top, and it's called When Believers Die. And so get a chance to read through that later on. It talks some information about some different things that things were being taught, and the way they looked at things in different aspects before Christianity and since Christianity. And what Paul's teachings had to do with it. There's some really good information in that as well. So take some time to look at that later on, but it deals with this hope aspect that we're talking about in this particular point. Do we have hope? We do, don't we? We have that hope. And when we're talking about hope, again, it's not that wish type of hope. It's that certainty hope. We know certain things are happening. I know my birthday is coming on April 21st. Hint, hint, hint. No, I'm just kidding. But I don't have a wish that it's coming. It might be here. I'm not sure. It's coming, right? I know that. It's just like we do as Christians.
Be here, but.
No, you might. But I'll be here. No, my birthday will be here. So it's that same kind of thing, though, right? We know it's coming. We know it's coming. We're looking forward to it. And now, in the case of the when Christ comes the second time, we don't have that exact date, but we have that same kind of certainty of hope. We know this is something that's going to happen. It's something we can look forward to. We yearn to see. And that's what we're talking about for the Christian. That should be our way of looking at that. So, it asks the question here, what does it look like to grieve with hope? Grieve with hope. Now that sounds strange, Norm.
Well, we're sad because they're not with us.
Ah, so it's okay to be sad?
It's okay to be sad.
It is, isn't it? Exactly. Was Jesus sad ever?
Yes.
Yeah. John 11:35. Now, this is a verse everyone should have memorized.
Jesus wept.
Jesus wept. It's an easy one. It's an easy one. Now, why did he weep? Do you remember the context of that verse, though? I'll give you a hint. A dear friend of his had died, Lazarus. A dear friend. And Lazarus' sisters, I guess, Mary and Martha, sisters, I think they were sisters. Yeah, very dear friends. The whole family was. And Lazarus died. Now, Lazarus had been sick, and he'd been told that. But he waited. Why did he wait?
Because God had a plan.
God had a plan, right. This plan was to encourage everyone through Lazarus. Now, Lazarus died, and Jesus came, and Martha said, "Why did you wait so long to come?" You know, or was it Mary who said that? Well, one of those two. And they couldn't understand. Why did you wait? You could have healed him, but now he's been dead these many days. And he said, "Well, you know, let's go check it out, right?" But he was overcome with grief, and that's why he wept. So we see that. It says, "Our friend Lazarus has fallen asleep, but I go that I may awaken him from his sleep." The disciples then said to him, "Lord, if he has fallen asleep, he'll recover." Now Jesus had spoken of his death, but they thought he was speaking of literal sleep. So Jesus said to them plainly, "Lazarus is dead, and I am glad for your sakes that I was not there, so that you may believe. But let us go to him." So when he went there, he said, Don't go into that tomb. Why? It stinks. He's been dead. It's too late. It's been 3 days or whatever it was. And so we know what happened, though. What happened? Lazarus come forth. And he came out. And that was an amazing thing. But that was to show that Jesus had the power over death. And we know that. But Jesus grieved as well. He grieved over the city of Jerusalem. Remember that? He looked at Jerusalem and said, "Jerusalem, Jerusalem, you know, I wanted to gather you like a hen gathers its chicks, but you would not have me." And he was grieving over that. He grieved when he went to the Garden of Gethsemane, remember? When he saw what was coming up, he knew it was coming up. And he sweat drops of blood. So we see that it's okay to grieve. It's okay to grieve. We must learn to grieve with hope. That's the key. Grieve with hope. And that's what they're talking about in these verses here. As believers, we can do that. When we have a fellow believer who dies, yes, we're sad. A family member, a friend, we're so sad. We're going to miss them, right? But we also know where they are. Paul wanted them to know the message he was about to deliver was also from God on this. So that's why we're going to look at these next verses and see what he says here. For these next verses, next two verses, we have lots of verses, just two every time here. I want you to identify the events for Christ's return that you see in these verses. Who has 15 and 16, number 2 for me?
According to the Lord's word, we tell you that we who are still alive, who are left until the coming of the Lord, will certainly not precede those who have fallen asleep. For the Lord himself will come down from heaven with a loud command, with the voice of an archangel, and with the trumpet call of God. And the dead in Christ will rise first.
So we have some words from Paul here, but they are not from Paul. What does he say?
They're from Paul.
They're from the Lord, right? These are words that I'm speaking to you, but they're not from me. They were the Lord's words, okay? And he, remember, he doesn't want them to be uninformed about these things, but he says, this is how it's going to happen, folks. You've heard these false things. Don't listen to them. This is what's going to happen, right? So what are some of these events we're going to see?
With a shout. Comes down shouting.
Okay, so it says there's going to be a shout, right? What else? There can be some vocalization here too.
With the voice of the archangel and with the trumpets of God.
Yeah. Now, some have suggested that maybe this shout and the voice of the archangel might be the same thing. They don't know. But they do know that this is going to be something that's going to be what?
Pretty obvious.
Pretty eventful, right? It's going to be pretty obvious. It's not going to be a secret return of Christ like there's one group that teaches,
Invisible.
right? It's not, invisible, yeah, the invisible one. It's not going to be that. People are going to know it. It's going to be evident, right? It's going to be something you cannot hide. Now, when Jesus first came, the incarnation of Christ, not a lot of people saw that event, right? We had some shepherds. The angels couldn't help themselves. I think they said, we've got to tell somebody. Let's go tell these shepherds, you know. They told the shepherds, right? And of course, it was announced by a star, and the wise men came too. But other than those things, there wasn't really much going on there. But this is going to be something that everyone will see, it says. You're going to hear the shout, this trumpet sound, and then you're going to see something miraculous. You're going to see those brothers and sisters, they're going to be with Christ, they're going to rise first. And this is going to be an exciting thing, he says. You don't have to worry about them being left behind. They're not going to be left behind. They're going to be leading the charge. Okay? And if you look more deeply into it, of course, when you die, you're with the Lord. Your spirit is with the Lord, right? So what we're seeing here is an infusion, if you will. The spirit and the body coming back out of the grave, being rejuvenated. What am I looking for? Glorified. What's that?
Incarnated?
Yeah, maybe that's it. But anyway, so you're going to see that happening. Is basically, you're going to see that the loved one coming out of the grave, being like they used to be, only better. And then it says, well, I want to jump to the next verses here. We're going to get there. But that's what you're going to see there, right? And this is part of the return of Christ at this point that we're seeing. And so the return of Christ, that's one of our other handouts. So I want to point that out to you briefly. This is a really, really good one too. It's handout number 4. Handout number 4 talks about the return of Christ. And again, it's using that word parousa. So you see that word parousa, don't be too put off by it. But it's describing this whole event, the whole aspect of Christ's return. And it says the church used several terms to refer to the return of Christ. Parousa meaning either coming or presence, like we talked about before. Often describe the Lord's return. And then there's epithania. Epithania? There, well. In religious usage, it describes the appearing of an unseen God, and that's in the Greek, of course. And then the revelation or the apocalypse of the power and the glory of the Lord, which eagerly anticipated by the church. And of course, the phrase "the day of the Lord," and that's mainly from the Old Testament theme. It says, but it also is common in the New Testament. That day or the day of Christ is similar phrases they use as synonyms. And it goes on to talk more and more about that, and I'll let you read that later yourselves, but it's a good study to also realize these things all talk about and are aspects of the return of Christ, or that aspect, that parousa. When they use that term, Christians were referring to that time when Christ would come again. And they're looking forward to it, that when Christ Jesus, who was absent from them, is now present with them. You know, like the royalty coming to visit an area, like we talked about before. Anyway, there's a lot of speculation, by the way, on timing. We're not going to get into that. And the reality of certain things and all that. We're just going to go on these verses we're talking about today. And there's a lot of things we could chase rabbits on. We're not going to do that, because this kind of aspect can lend itself to that, right? But we're focusing on this part here where the Thessalonians had this problem. And the problem was they had been given false information, and they were grieving because of it. It was causing a problem within the church of them being enthusiastically for the Lord, and how that can also do that for us as well, right? When we don't fully understand certain teachings, can that cause a problem for us? Yeah, it can cause us to be discouraged as well. So, asking the question says, what does the inclusion of those believers who had died previously and those who are living at Christ's return, what does that tell us about Christ's power and glory?
Nothing stands
pretty
in his
awesome.
way.
What's that?
Nothing stands in his
Nothing
way.
will stop it. Yeah, nothing will stand in his way. Exactly right. And we see this throughout Christ's ministry, by the way. When we think about, well, how can these bodies be brought out of the grave and be alive again? Well, we see what Lazarus was brought out of the grave, right? We see the widow's son that was dead, that Christ rose from the dead. We see people who have been born lame, could never walked before, told, stand up, pick up your mat, and go home. They stood up and they picked up their mat and they walked away. How can you do that if you've never used your legs ever? I mean, let's say the legs are strengthened, but you've never learned to walk. How can you do that? The power of God is just amazing when we see this. The same thing for those who are born blind and things like that. Anyway, a lot of exciting things to read there, and I digress and I take too much time when I get into them. I can't help it. So, Paul concluded 1 Thessalonians chapter 4 with a command to do what? We're going to talk about this a little bit here. The whole idea of this was to encourage them, right? To comfort and encourage them, right? So we're going to look at that here in these last ones here. These last section is called Reunion, verses 17 through 18. And I want you to notice the emotions. Maybe the emotions that you would feel if you were listening to Paul's word and you were in this situation. If you were in the shoes of Thessalonians, you'd be taught these things. But now you're hearing this, what kind of emotions would you feel? Okay, let's look at this last one. Now, who's got number 3? Go ahead and read that for me.
Then we who are alive and remain will be caught up together with them in the clouds to meet the Lord in the air, and so we shall always be with the Lord. Therefore comfort one another with these words.
So, what kind of emotions would you feel at this point? What you need? Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, you're taking it from me now. I see what you're doing. Well, how would you feel if you were these people and you heard these words?
I would feel relief.
I would feel relief too.
And comforted, yes.
Oh yeah, it would be like a burden just being lifted off your shoulders. You know, something like that happens, and you realize, oh, that was wrong. It's not that going to be that way. It's going to be a good thing. It would be a fantastic thing, right? To know that. To realize that teaching was an error, and you have now the correct teaching on this, right? That the emotions, I would be ecstatic. I'd be reassured. I'd be like relieved. Now I know. Now I know. So let's look at these verses here. It says, "Those who are alive and remain." Who's that? That's us right now, right?
Christians, yeah.
That's right.
Believers.
Yeah, us right now. We will be caught up together with them. Now, the them he's talking about is the previous section, 2 verses, right? We talked about that before, right? When they're lifted up into heaven, the dead are. We're going to be then meeting them. Is this going to be one fantastic reunion, or what? You think about family reunions maybe you've been to before. This will be amazing. It says we're going to meet them together. It says in the clouds. So a lot of times this word clouds is used when Jesus was taken up to heaven. What received him? When a cloud received him, it says. In other words, so it's a symbol of the fact that there is heaven above, and that's where we're going to be meeting together. Now, will it actually be on a cloud somewhere? Cumulus, Cumulus clouds? I don't know. But it's a picture of what it helps them to understand it's going to be above. It won't be down here on earth. It'll be something above. It may be in heaven that we'll meet them in that situation. I don't know. But it's important to understand that we're going to then be with them and be with the Lord. And it says what else?
Therefore comfort one another.
Yeah, before that though, we shall always be with the Lord. Think about those words. No longer will there be a separation or a worry or concern. We'll speak directly we'll see Jesus right there. We'll see the Apostle Paul. We'll see whatever. Those people will be around there. You can talk to them and see them. You'll be with them, your friends, your family that you've missed that have died in the Lord, right? Now, will there be some tears because of people who are not there? There might be. But what does it say about that? He's going to wipe away all those tears. And that's that last part. It says what? Verse 18.
Encourage.
Yeah. Therefore, encourage, comfort one another with these words that we're talking about, with these things. Will it be a comfort for us? Sure will be.
Should be.
Sure will be, yeah. So, and is there any specific words or phrases that stand out to you? We kind of talked about them already. How about caught up? That's a term. Do you look forward to that? I do. Caught up. And what's another one? Meeting the Lord. Yeah. always being with the Lord. Yeah. Those are words and phrases that stand out to me, at least. And those are words and phrases of encouragement. And he says, therefore, encourage one another. Therefore, comfort one another. So, are we supposed to be talking about this? Yes, we are. We're supposed to remind people, hey, don't worry. Yes, that loved one is passed on. We're here. We love you. And you're going to see that loved one again.
But it also says God will bring Jesus those who have fallen asleep.
Yeah. Yeah. Those who are dead.
That's very encouraging.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. Fantastically encouraging. Definitely. Because so many times, you go, like I said, you go to a funeral and it's so sad. So sad to hear these things, about the person and how they died without the Lord. They may not talk about that, but you know that. I had, like I said, I went to a funeral for a coworker, and it was a real sad thing because he wasn't a Christian, and you just almost despair to go to those kind of situations. But he was my coworker, and I wanted to show support for him, so I went. But it was a sad thing. Anyway, going on here. The command was written with this expectation that the Thessalonian believers would live this out at once. And that's what he's doing here. He's not saying, so think about comforting one another. He says, therefore. I want to make sure I understood that. That is something that's a command from Paul to that church. Is it a command to us as well? Yeah, we should be comforting one another with these kind of words, so that people can understand them and not be living a life of grief over these kind of things. So Paul did not call the church at Thessalonica to be there merely for the moment, but rather to be engaged in extended partnership. In other words, to continue on, even though those people had passed away. It wasn't the end. So continue on. He's encouraging them to do that. That's what he says, comforting one another, and that's inferred in that kind of thing. So why do you think it might be important for us to continue to walk with people as they process their grief? Now, continue to walk with people, that's another word, another phrase, meaning to what? If you're walking with a person, you're doing what?
You're upholding them.
Yeah, you're upholding them, you're putting your arm around them, you're encouraging them, right? So why is it important, even for a Christian, though, to have that kind of thing in our life?
Continued impact. We impact them, they do it to another, and then they do it to another, and we grow.
And the grief is real. The separation, the loss is real. So we need to do that because people need to process grief. There's psychologically, there's reasons for this. That if you don't process grief, you run a real problem in your life. If you lose a loved one and you ignore that aspect, it will cause problems in your life. We need to process that, but we need people to stand beside us and give us that shoulder to lean on too. To be able to talk to them, to be able to, maybe to cry with them, and that's what he's talking about here. So we need to do that and make sure as Christians we do that, because there are dangers in not doing so. We need to help people to go through that kind of process. All right. So in our key doctrine today, it's about last things. And if you look at your first handout, the first page, it's at the bottom. And it says, last things. According to his promise, Jesus Christ will return personally and visibly in glory to the earth. The dead will be raised, and Christ will judge all men in righteousness. And we have some verses associated with that, and I think you stole them from me, so go ahead and read it.
Jesus said, "Then they will see the Son of Man coming in a cloud with great power and great glory. But when these things begin to take place, straighten up and lift up your heads, because your redemption is drawing near."
And that's Luke 21, 27 through 28. I forgot to mention that.
The other one, Jude.
Yes.
It was also about these men that Enoch, in the 7th generation from Adam, prophesied, saying, "Behold, the Lord came with many thousands of his holy ones."
So again, it's reiterating, Jude, is that this is going to be a big event. That when he comes, it's going to be a big event. We're going to be with him. There's going to be many thousands of the holy ones. And by the way, holy ones doesn't mean angels. It's referring to what? Us, right? We are cleansed through the blood of Christ, right? So we are those holy ones he's referring to there as well. Doesn't mean there's not angels involved too. Anyway, so again, let's finish this up now. If you remember, our main idea is the promised return of Christ gives us as Christians, gives us hope when grieving. And that was the purpose for particular part he wrote here. Let's look at the summary points of this lesson today. The first one is that the return of Jesus gives Christians hope when grieving the death of another believer. And it does, doesn't it? We want to have that hope. We want to have that comfort, right? The second one is Jesus will return in his full glory, gathering all believers through the ages for eternity. What a big party that's going to be. I can't wait for that. Third one, the certainty of Christ's return should encourage Christians when grieving. It's okay to grieve, but it should still encourage us. It should help us through that process. And it is a process. And we will, sometimes it seems like it won't get better, but it will get better. And we need to encourage and comfort each other in that same thing. So 1 Thessalonians 4:13 is our key verse. I'm going to reread that really quick. It says, "For if we believe that Jesus died and rose again, even so God will bring with him those who have fallen asleep in Jesus." And that is a key part of this whole thing we're talking about. Recalling this verse gives us a way of remembering the hope of the promised return of Christ that gives believers when they're grieving. And that church in Thessalonica, had those issues, and they needed to be addressed, and that's why Paul wrote this. So the challenge from today's lesson, today's study, is to take specific and tangible actions in our lives to comfort and encourage each other as Christ would want. Now, it doesn't mean just brothers and sisters in the Lord. You comfort others too as well. When somebody has lost a brother or sister, right? Or a friend, coworker, whatever it is. And in that comfort, you can tell them, hey, this is what the Lord has done for me and helped me to deal with the situations similar to my life. You need to know the Lord about it right now, because I don't want to be separate from you. And this is a good way to maybe introduce that aspect to somebody like that. So, anyway, we can also get comfort from songs. What a transition, Norm. There's several songs that talk about it. What are some songs that you know that talk about the Perusa? The coming of God, coming of Christ, second time. How about the one that Derek plays a lot? Some glad morning when this life is over, I'll fly away. That's a good one too. What's another one?
When the roll is called up yonder.
When the roll is called up yonder. Yeah, and there's
Swing low.
what?
Swing low.
Swing low, sweet chariot. Yeah, talking about
Shall we
lifting.
gather at the river?
Shall we get the river? There's several about heaven, but anyway, the one I want us to look at here is the last handout number 5. When the roll is called up yonder, and I got to finish here because I know I'm almost out of time. So if you turn to handout number 5 and you want to sing it with me, we'll just sing the first and last verses, okay? When the trumpet of the Lord shall sound and time shall be no more, when the morning breaks eternal, bright and fair, when the saved of earth shall gather over on the other shore, and the roll is called up yonder, I'll be there. When the roll is called up yonder, I'll be there. When the roll is called up yonder, I'll be there. When the roll is called up yonder. When the roll is called up yonder, I'll be there. Let us labor for the Master from the dawn till setting sun. Let us talk of all his wondrous love and care. Then when all of life is over and our work on earth is done, and the roll is called up yonder, I'll be there. When the roll is called up yonder, I'll be there. When the roll is called up yonder, I'll be there. When the roll is called up yonder. When the roll is called up yonder, I'll be there. We will be there, folks. We will be there. Let's have a word of prayer. We'll be dismissed. Thank you, God, for those words of encouragement, these words of hope that Paul wrote to this church in Thessalonica, Lord, that was experiencing grief because of these false teachings. Lord, we can run across these things in our own lives. Help us to know your word, frontwards, backwards, sideways, Lord. So when we see these kind of things, that we can confront these things and correct these teachings to encourage and to comfort others as well. Thank you for your promise coming, Lord. We look forward to that. We know it's coming soon. Lord, I just pray that you'd help us now, like I said, to comfort and encourage those that we know that are grieving. In your Son's name, amen. Thank you for being with us, Grace Baptist Church. My name is Norm Ellis. This is Adult 1. Thank you for being with us online and in the classroom.